Good evening and welcome to InFocus, a production of the Barbados Government Information Service. I'm your host, Sharifa Medford-Gilkes. Tonight, we confront an issue that continues to shape national conversations and concern us all: crime. From rising incidents in our communities to systemic challenges that go beyond what meets the eye, the question of how we address crime, and more importantly, why it occurs, has never been more urgent. In this episode, we'll take a closer look at the root causes of crime, explore how it affects our families, neighborhoods, and national psyche, and discuss the way forward through justice, reform, and community involvement. To help us examine this issue, our Director of the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit, Cheryl Willoughby, Vice President of the Alliance of Reform-Minded Entrepreneurs, Pedro Ellis, and member of the Benevolent Anger Management Project, Curtis Bascombe. And after our break, trauma and addiction specialist consultant Dr. Tessa Beausejour and president of the Alliance of Reform-Minded Entrepreneurs, Glenroy Babb, will join us as the discussion continues. But before we get to that, Mrs. Willoughby and gentlemen, good night and welcome.
Thank you. Good night, too.
Thank you for being here. We've been seeing some troubling incidents recently. Ms. Willoughby, can you paint a picture of the current situation? And I know you have the Crime Observatory, so you have the facts and the data there. Can you explain what's driving these events from your perspective and your research?
Right. Just to give the audience some background information on the Barbados Crime Observatory, it is housed at the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit, which is under the Office of the Attorney General. And what we do, we collate information from all criminal justice agencies, including the schools, of incidents of violence and other crimes. We've recently was able to also get the hospital involved in collating information on patients presenting with wounds and so on as a result of violence. So the observatory allows us to have an overall picture of crime, the nature of crime, and what exactly are we supposed to do in terms of targeting specific areas. To answer your question regarding crime, what we have seen over the past 12 months between January 1st last year and December 31st, 2024, we saw a drastic increase in homicides. We saw incidents where firearm-enabled homicides were prevalent and was causing some grave concerns. Last year, as you know, we had 49 murders. 34 of them were committed with a firearm. Also, this year, we've had so far to date, we've had 25 homicides. Now, what the observatory also was able to glean was that the age of the perpetrator is also decreasing. Last year, we saw the average age of the perpetrator of murder being as low as 21 years old. In 2023, we saw it at 17, 18 years old. That should cause Barbados to have some concern, given that at 18, 19 years old, children have recently left school, but yet they are involved in very serious crime. Although police stats would indicate that crime in general, especially major crime, has dropped, we have seen over 200% increase in homicides. And these homicides we can determine are as a result of conflict within our communities, especially among our young people, because if we look at the demographics of the perpetrator and the victim, we would recognize that all of them are under the age of 35. So also what we gleaned from our observatory was that in terms of major crimes, robberies are also a major concern, as well as domestic burglaries. So to paint a picture of what is happening on the ground, it should tell us that we need to be very mindful of the fact that, as you rightly said, it has to be a whole country approach in order to stymie what we're seeing within our communities. Also, what I think is important is that when we look at the areas where these crimes are committed, we found that they are mostly concentrated in densely populated areas. I know we would have recently had areas like the Pine and so on earmarked as hotspots, but what Barbadians must understand is that crime, especially violent crime, is not static in any particular area. It is very fluid, and because of the availability of transportation and being able to access certain areas, you find that crime is not concentrated, but rather it is all over the island.
Is it possible that the increases that you've been seeing could be tied to maybe poor conflict resolution and anger management issues?
Yeah, I think that most of the violent crimes that we're seeing is more retaliatory more than predatory, meaning that persons are not hiding in the dark and attacking persons, but rather it is as a result of conflict occurring within communities that need to be resolved. And I know that back in 2023, when they had the accord between the various fractions, we saw a decrease in murders. But since then, we are now seeing a spike again. So it tells me that we need to get in there with the various community members and have a conversation to see how best we can resolve some of the underlying conflict that we are seeing within our communities.
Okay, well, I know you're telling us from your professional perspective, but we have the guys here who are actually on the ground working with young people and other people. Can you tell us about what you're also seeing?
What I'm seeing is that what Mr. Willoughby said is true. I could confirm that is that there's a lot of communication. There's a lot of trying to understand the youngsters, because I interact with youngsters every day, and sometimes they listen, or yes, I hear you, I can do this, I can do the third, but then next week or 2 days after, you hear them involved in something completely different than what they say they're going to do. And then one of the problems that I realize is a lot of employment. Youngsters are finding it very difficult to get employment, sometimes of a conviction. And I have seen it because my wife, she do police certificate characters for persons that seeking employment, and sometimes majority don't get through because of a conviction. So one of the things that I keep saying, and I hope that it can happen, is that if the government can work with the corporations in Barbados to bring it on board to say, well, we understand that we have a vast workforce, but they are not working because they have a conviction or because they have been to prison. Because I know situations where persons was not convicted, do not have a conviction, and get work in society, and because of management finding out that it was incarcerated, lost their job. And this particular case, person that I'm speaking about, he's back in prison right now. He was working and things was going good, and from things lost his job, start living with the wrong company, and unfortunately he got hold of a firearm and he's back in does. So one of the things that we need to understand, that persons need a chance.
Okay, Curtis, can you tell us about the anger management project you've been working with?
Well, the project that I was involved in, it was started when I was incarcerated at Her Majesty Laws, and through my good friend here is what even made me join up with the group, because me and him had a altercation, and it was decided that I had to go to this anger management. And honest truth is, the first day that I was there, it was good. And we even amended our little squabble before the group, before I attended the group. So it was like seeing a lot of guys coming in to the same sessions. Some of these guys is who I was talking to while being in there, trying to deter them from the road they was going, because I'm not a violent person, but I also am not a scared person either. And to tell you the truth is, I know what violence is, but I don't condone it, right? We here now in Barbados, we have the Caribbean on the whole, we have a problem that starts from within the household. It's not the streets that start it. The household allows people that they should have wards taken care of, and parents and guardians don't mentor the children. We have primary school children right now that can be seen, even recorded on buses on the road, behaving atrocious, and there's nobody to tell them nothing, because if you try to correct them, you get abused and sent back from where people don't even know you come from, and it's not an easy task. If we have households that allow these things to happen, it starts from there. Just remember that it starts from the house. If we can't get that challenge, it will never stop.
Why do you think that we become the society where we can't talk to each other, talk about things first, that we have to, act?
I want to support what Curtis, right? What Curtis just said in terms of the family. And we recently did some research to examine recidivism in Barbados. Barbados has a recidivism rate of about 63%.
Explain that for the audience who may not understand what that means.
Recidivism, we measure it based on reconviction, reincarceration, and rearrest. Persons who are released from prison, released from the criminal justice system, and reoffend within a period of time. We found that most of the persons who are recidivists normally recidivate within 6 months after leaving prison or having gone through the criminal justice system. And when we examined the profile of these persons, we found that a lot of the problems started while these youngsters were at school. You said primary school, while they were at school. And so we found that a lot of the behaviors were not corrected at that time. It went through the juvenile liaison scheme, they went through the probation department, some of them went to GIS, the government industrial school, and some of them even ended up at DAWS. So that we must have systems where when we identify youngsters at an early age who are experiencing problems, who are displaying certain criminogenic behaviors, that we address those behaviors early so that they do not go on to become hardened criminals. Curtis talked about the home and the family, and it's true. I'm a social worker first before I'm a criminologist, and what I've found in my own experience as a social worker, we go into certain homes and sometimes the parents need more help than the children. You go to schools, you encourage them to participate in what is going on within the school setting. They're not interested. Check out the PDAs, how many parents are there? So we, as Curtis rightly said, we need to target some of the homes. I think that within my own work, government has indicated that they will be targeting some vulnerable families. That work has started, and so we need to intensify what we are doing at the community level so that we can target these families to identify early these children who are experiencing problems.
Based on what y'all have been seeing, what are some of the warning signs? I think you can get this answer from anybody. What are some of the warning signs that we can look for, that we can identify these people and then seek to get help for them before it gets out of hand?
Well, the warning signs would be the teachers are able to pick up these warning signs, the behaviors, the coming to school late, not attending school. We did a tracer study. A tracer study is a study where you have a cohort of individuals, and over a 3 to 5 year period, you trace where they're at. So we looked at approximately 1,500 children that would have left school between 2017 and 2018, and see where they were in 2021. We found that some of them did well, some of them were incarcerated, some for even murder. Some went through the juvenile liaison scheme, some went through the probation department, and these were children who were either expelled, superannuated. You know what superannuation is? When you reach 16 years old, they put you out of school because you have behavioral problems, or even if you're in second form, you have to go because you've reached the age of 16. Some parents did not send their children back to school for whatever reason. And we had situations where children were not at school for an entire semester, an entire term, and nobody followed up as to why these children were not within the school setting, right? So I say all that to say that we need to have proper monitoring systems.
It sounds like we have a lack of that, a lack of support.
We need to have proper monitoring systems within our schools so that when we recognize that children are not coming to school, they're having problems and so on, we can have social workers within the setting to address these issues early.
But obviously there's also scope for the community level and programs like yours to also assist as well, right?
Correct. We as the Alliance of Reform Money Entrepreneurs, we try to deal with any level or any age of persons, because it's not only the children is who definitely need the guidance and the talking to, but they have some adults that do not have the right mindset. The mindset is of persons that they believe or they feel that this is how it is, so that's how it's supposed to be. They don't understand that there's change, and could change, and because these role models. I do prison already, and sometimes because of what I went to prison for, people think or feel that I should be living a lifestyle of badness or in pani blocks or pani ghettos. But I learned and I realized that I have a son, and I want to be my role model for my son. And since then, I am grandfather now, and as my grandson, number one in this world, I believe so. And I live and be considerate of what I do, what I say, how I say, because children is pick up everything. So as Willoughby here and my colleague, is that we need to be focused. We need to understand the iceberg effect. We need to understand that when a child that never really raises his voice, start raising his voice or start moving different, we need to liaison on him because something is wrong. And the iceberg effect is that you see the top, but you don't know all the problems he have. He might get up and come to school without breakfast. Might have a crawl with sister or brother, bring the attitude to school. And then it goes on to this person, and then school might even have a fight because of something that happened at home. Okay. So as Mr. Willoughby said, we need to be focused and we need to be observant of our youngsters, because for the youngsters, they can find themselves in ghettos, blocks, and they can get exposed to things that they should not be exposed to. All blocks is not bad, because some blocks, children go or people go on blocks to socialize, to get away from the strain and what's not. So it's not all bad with blocks, but it's what the person on the blocks is exposing the youngsters to. Because the youngsters is accessible to anything. You can program them easy to do things that they would normally do. So that we need role models out there on the blocks, in the homes, in the communities that can. Because you went to prison don't mean that you have to be on the blocks, in the streets doing wrong things. You understand? And I try to be a role model for people in my community. I always say, oh, you're the hardest working person that I know and think. But I know where I come from. I come from nothing. I learned to read and write in prison. as an entrepreneur today. I was in prison with persons that, because they might shoot somebody or then charge for a serious crime, then believe that I gotta go home. These conversations I have with people, I gotta got my gun, I can't lie, I can't make sure. I said, big man, I've been there and done that. And I always try to be correct, because them believe that everybody on the same level, and you gotta do change. You gotta prove and show people that you change. And when like for instance, he said he had a conflict, and we resolve our conflict as big men even before we were in the group.
And 2 days.
Yes, and 2 days. You understand?
And
so, because we gotta understand each other, there gonna be misunderstandings, but we gotta be man enough or woman enough to say, I think I offend you, and I was probably wrong for doing it, and I apologize. And sometimes apologies go a long way.
Before I throw the next question to you, Curtis, I just want to remind the members of our audience that you can submit your questions and your queries, your concerns and comments, and we will have them addressed in the second half of this show. But first, back to the issue of the situation of anger management, Curtis. Do you think that the anger management, I'm guessing this is you're working with the incarcerated persons that are being reintegrated into society, right?
Well, no, I am not working with the guys. I was part of the group before. But that group is exceptionally, is great.
So it's something that you think that can help our younger people?
Yes, it can.
And also the persons who are being released, are they aware then that they have a role somewhat of, speaking to these youngsters to try to also impart what they learned to avoid similar situations reoccurring?
I'm going to speak candidly on that, right? The first thing that can be done in that part when a person is released from prison, while being there, the programs that they get involved in prison, it should be something that they're looking forward to get out of there to deal with. Prison is not a nice place. It's not. Yes, it is there for you to be incarcerated, to be punished or whatever. But being there for the 8 months that I was there, that was the worst 8 months of my life. And I would never want to go back there. I try my best every single day. Every step that I make, I calculate every step, because I do not want to go back there. I would not encourage nobody to go there, condone any person talking that they can do this and do that and go to jail. I don't like to hear people speaking like that. I don't. And it is easy for you to get there and hard for you to get out, because most of these guys that you see now on the street involved in crime, they're living at the mothers and the fathers. They're doing crime. The parents have to fend for them to get them released, to pay for lawyers and what's not. And it shouldn't be so.
So why we still seeing that mindset with people saying, I will go and do my time?
Yeah, because you see a lot of them watching television, and the prisons in television, everybody eating, walking with snacks in the hand and got on the clothes and looking happy. It's not nice. It's not a place to encourage no one to go to. You should try to stay as far from there as possible. Yes, the program that we had there is good. What it needs from me is more frequent. It was too limited, because enough guys couldn't get the chance to partake in it. And actually, I used to fight to make sure you get to that class. It was very interesting, uplifting, and every day is a new topic, and people getting to resolve the problems within that class. No matter who come into the class from different quads or whatever, when they get there, everything is calm, because the influence that it has on them is no negativity. It's all about positive things within this class that was going on. And Mr. Babb is a king on that part. I give him the trophy for that.
What I want to add to that too is that the program is still going on in prison. Our president, Mr. Babb, he facilitates that program every Tuesday. And one of the things that we are trying to do, we are trying to create a program with the prison and the probation department, whereas we get more facilitators to go into the prison persons that have 3 months remaining or 9 months remaining, we could sit down with, we can, that interests that are serious about change, because we don't want to waste time on persons that going back out knowing in their heart and mind that they're going to do the same thing that they was doing all the time. Persons that are serious, that have 9 months, 6 months, that we can incorporate them in the anger management project, and we can mentor them, find out what level of intelligence they have, their level of education, their empowerment, and how they can relate and deal with people, so that when they come home, we continue the mentorship. And hopefully by then, we will have the government on board, where they have corporations that are willing to give persons that have convictions or persons that was incarcerated the opportunity to be a proper citizen in Barbados.
They have one question I want to squeeze in before we go to our break. Do you think children need good moral grounding, attending places like Sunday school or being part of a community organization? Would these things help? This is coming from Frank Gilkes.
Well, I'm going to speak on that part first. If you bring a child into this world, you put the child in a square room, paint all the walls and the ceiling and the floor white, give the child one of those magazines to read. For said, if at least not give him to read, because you got to learn him to read first, right? And that is the only thing he can see in front of his eyes. That is the only thing he will deal with. Anything else on the outside would be foreign to him, right? So what children deal with from small, some remember, some get rid of, and going through the course of their life to pick up on things. So we cannot have everything exposed to children. Things should be hidden from children, and observe children's actions, the friends, the way they speak to authority, because that's one of the first things that happen. When you see a child can look at a person and cut up the eye and chips them out that's supposed to be authority, that's the first no-no. You get down on that, you don't laugh at it and take pictures and put on TikTok about it. That don't make no sense. That's why we feel so much parenting. Schools, we have teachers. Yes, teachers do an excellent job sometimes, but a teacher can come to school and have a bad day. Never bring your bad day to the school. Leave it outside in the car park. You know, if we do not bring up the children right, it will continue forever.
What's your take on it, Cheryl?
Well, let me see the question again.
Oh, he's talking about Sunday school, instilling, you know, those moral values in children from...
Right. And that's important, because we also did a study looking to examine the participation of young people in certain community activities. And we found that a lot of the young people nowadays are not going to church. They are not involved in community work. They are not involved in anything positive within the communities. I recently did a study only last year to look at what was happening within communities and what were some of the sociological drivers of violence within these communities. And a lot of the parents that we interviewed, they indicated they were not interested in getting involved in anything within the communities because they were afraid of what was happening within the communities, and they were not allowing their children to be involved in anything. So Sunday school, community activities, these were things that children were not involved in. But I think that now with the National Peace Program, that is now under the Ministry of People Empowerment, they have a goal now to go into these high crime communities and make a difference with the projects and the programs that they have designed to reach at-risk youth. And I'm hopeful that that will bear significant fruit in the future.
Okay, good point. We're going to take a short break right now, and when we return, we'll be joined by two more guests as we continue this necessary conversation about crime in Barbados. Keep your questions and comments coming, and let's chat about how we can build a safer, more resilient society together.
Just a Conversation, the podcast where we discuss the topics that matter to you.
From real stories to real talk, we dive into everything. No filters, no fluff.
We're talking about the issues you actually care about. Finance, mental health, sports, entertainment, and so much more.
It's not just talk. It's conversations that bring us together, challenge us, and keep it real.
Don't have time to watch? No problem.
Just turn on the video while you're cooking and we'll keep you company.
Listen on your morning commute, while you work out at the gym, or even when you get home on evenings and chilling out.
Wherever you are, however you listen, this is your space for real conversations.
Join us.
Join us.
Just a conversation.
Available on all streaming platforms or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at GIS Barbados to share your thoughts or to stay connected.
Attention citizens, if you notice any unusual insects or animals on imported fruits, vegetables or plants, do not turn a blind eye. These strange organisms may be invasive species, threats that can wreak havoc on our farms, ecosystems and jeopardize our local food supply. Early detection and swift reporting are our best defenses against the spread of potentially dangerous pests and diseases. Contact the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security at 535-5100. Email to hotline@agriculture.gov.bb or WhatsApp a picture to 832-2445. Protect our agriculture, because a healthy Barbados begins with you.
Skip the line, stay inside, and pay the easy way online with the Pace Digital mobile app. Now you can pay for your renewed license, police certificate of character, and more via the Easy Pay Plus platform with the Pace Digital mobile app. Log into Easy Pay Plus, select the service, and confirm. Select the Pace Digital mobile app payment icon for your QR code. Open your Pace Digital mobile app and select the Pace Digital Pay tab. Scan the QR code and confirm your payment. Visit us online to learn more. Don't have the Pace Digital mobile app? Download it today.
Think before you click. Agents, think before you click. Don't forget now. Before you spread wrong information. Think before you click. Just stop and think. Think before you click. BBS. Think before you click. If you can't confirm the source of the information, think before you click. When friends send news to your phone, check the source or leave it alone. Cause people creating fake news to deceive you and confuse. Alright yo, accident broadcast on WhatsApp. Check yourself, don't forward that. Have respect for the victim's family. You would not share family like that. Think before you click. Agents, think before you click. Don't forget now. Before you spread wrong information, think before you click. Just stop and think. Think before you click. Think before you click. If you can't confirm the source of the information, think before you click.
Welcome back to InFocus. Joining our panel are trauma and addiction specialist consultant, Dr. Tessa Beausejour, and president of the Alliance of Reform-Minded Entrepreneurs, Glenroy, Babb. Welcome and good night.
Thank you.
Can you just give us a brief introduction on yourselves and your work?
Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Tessa, and I am an addiction and trauma specialist, and I work with young people, adults who have a history of trauma and addiction that correlates with incarceration and juvenile justice.
Okay.
Yeah, pleasant good evening to all. Glenroy Babb. I'm the president of the Alliance of Reform-Minded Entrepreneurs, the first cooperative started in Barbados that addressed the issues and needs of the formerly incarcerated, which was originally registered on March 2nd, 2023. I'm also an anger management counselor who developed a curriculum, the Benevolent Anger Project, which has been at Dodds Correctional Facility since 2018. This project started initially as a community project at 2 Mile Hill in 2015 because of the need to address anger and the underlying causes of anger before it leaves and morphs into aggression. And from that, we saw the need, once I started going into the prison, to create a program and create an organization that aids and assists those coming home from the correctional institution at Dodds Prison to be able to help with the 3 R's: reform, rehabilitation, and reintegration, which, if done correctly, will ultimately lead to lowering recidivism.
Well, as you know, we've been talking about the current situation here in Barbados, and we were trying to get to the nitty-gritty of it, and we've actually even tied it down to younger people and children, and noticing warning signs where they have anger issues and so on. Have there been any notable findings in your work with trauma persons, persons that were incarcerated or children? Because you have a pretty broad scope of people that you work with.
Yeah, so right now I am working on a project with the probation department, a project that's like 15 months of the clinical piece and then 3 more months of the monitoring and evaluation. And so before I selected the youth for the program, I tested all of the children in 2 areas. I tested them as far as adverse childhood experiences, and when we think about adverse childhood experiences, we're talking about traumatic experiences that have happened to a child, or traumatic conditions that have happened to a child before the age of 18. And I also tested them on what we call anger reactions. And every single child I tested scored extremely high on what we call adverse childhood experiences, where adverse childhood experiences we put into 2 categories. So it's what has happened to the child and what is happening in the home. So when we look at those markers, we're looking, has the child been emotionally abused? Has the child been sexually abused? Has the child been physically abused? Those are some of the markers I look for. And the other markers I look for is what's happening in the home that the child is exposed to. It could be extreme bouts of anger, swearing at the child, lack of support, parental mental illness, addiction in the home. And every child that I tested that is in probation scored extremely high for the adverse childhood experiences, and also extremely high for anger reactions. So there's a scale of 1 to 5 on anger reactions from all the, what we call that chronic trauma that is happening every day that they're exposed to. And what I'm seeing, as Curtis so beautifully talked about before, it does start in the home, because a lot of it that the children are exposed to is actually happening inside of the home. Some of it is happening in community, some of it is happening in school, but primarily most of it is happening in the home. And all of the children that I scored 4s and 5s out of 1 to 5. Most of them scored 5s. So the reaction from all of the adverse childhood experiences they're experiencing, the reaction from the trauma they're experiencing, is resulting in anger as a way to cope. And so that is something that we really have to think about, is to really begin to work with parents, because what we're seeing is not happening in isolation.
When you say work with parents, walk me through that. What exactly do you think you should do, or what kind of conversations will you have with those parents to kind of try to stop what was happening?
Well, one of the segments of the program is that I actually have been doing parent workshops with the parents.
Okay.
And so what I see is the huge correlation of the parents who have the buy-in and who come, you start to see the decline in the anger and the outbursts with the children. And so what I do is I start with just psychoeducation, letting them know how the way they speak to their children, the things that their children are exposed to, have a real effect emotionally on their children. And so to start to get them to see that the home creates the environment. And so that is what is really important for parents to start to see. And what I'm starting to notice with the parents, like the comments are, oh my goodness, I recognize that I went through my own childhood trauma. I went through my own childhood adverse experience, and I'm parenting out of that. So there's this recognition that it is actually very generational, that's been passed on in the way that they parent, in anger and all the different modes that they use that are not supportive of the child.
Okay, well, we have our second question for the night, and this is coming from St. Kitts, from Vernon Henry. The judicial system needs to be fully engaged on this issue. What are your opinions?
In terms of the judicial system, it depends on which aspect of the judicial system they're speaking about. I find that Barbados, not only Barbados, but when we look across the Caribbean, you find that the emphasis is more on criminal justice, more so than solving the criminogenic issues that we're seeing presenting within our communities. Yes, we need more judicial officers, more judges, and so on and so forth. But we need to also treat crime as we treat any illness from a public health perspective, right? We diagnose, we treat, and if we realize the treatment that we are prescribing is not working, we go back at the table again with the parents and everybody else involved, and we seek other alternatives and other strategies to address what we're seeing. So yes, the judicial system, we need more judges, we need more prosecutors, etc. But we also need to have social workers. We need to have persons who can engage in conflict mediation. We also need to have mental health practitioners and so on addressing the sociological issues that are confronting our young people. So yes, criminal justice, but also we need to look at it also from a sociological perspective. How can we address those social determinants of violence and crime that we're seeing among our young people? And Dr. Tessa spoke a lot about it in
What's your take, Glenroy, on it?
I agree pretty much with what Ms. Willoughby had to say. And looking at the issue, we always have to deal with the root of the issue. And if we're not dealing with the root, then we're just putting a Band-Aid over a wound that needs to have surgery. So it becomes very much important that we engage the causative factors that contribute to a person to go out there and commit crimes. As Pedro Ellis spoke about, the Vice President of the Army, it doesn't just start right here. It's an iceberg. We see 15% of the iceberg, but on the line is the 85% that sank the Titanic. So what we need to do is address the 85% that we are not looking at. All we are looking at is the behavior that is causing this, but we are not looking at the root of the problem. So it goes back to the root, finding out why. Why did this happen? What are the underlying reasons? Let's address this, and you address future behavior from not occurring.
Which is what you've been seeing, Tessa. As you said, the parents, then they realize that they also had their own trauma and probably they have passed it on.
Yes, exactly. And it's interesting what Mr. Babb said, because actually the project is called Pruning the Root, that I'm involved with the probation department, because it is looking at the root causes. Because as he said, we see the behavior of the youth, right? But we're not seeing the pain. We see the gun, but we don't see their tears. We see the violence, but we don't understand the sexual abuse, the emotional abuse that's behind that. We see the weapon, but we are not understanding the tears. We're not understanding everything that they have gone through that has just boiled up in them with this chronic overwhelm, because the thing about trauma is this. Trauma is not about the event that happened. Yes, the event is important. Trauma is really about what's been left inside of me because of what happened to me. So if I have parents who have not had a way to support me or to talk to me in a certain way, I get screaming, I get yelling, then what's been left inside of me? I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. No one's coming. No one's showing up. And so that becomes overwhelming to a young person's system. And so what happens is then you see the vex, you see the anger, but it's because of the fact that when they become activated, right? Because trauma doesn't come back as a memory. It comes back as literally a somatic, trigger, and it's overwhelmed. And so then you see the aggression, and then you see all those things. But we have to look to see, what are these children being faced with that is bringing on this behavior? And it's been so beautiful to work with these youth. I call them my babies now, because it's been I have seen 12 to 17-year-old youth, boys, who now are starting to understand, when I become violent, when I become aggressive, it's a way to numb my feelings of I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, because that, having a gun, being in someone's face, hitting someone, makes them feel powerful, because they have been feeling so powerless, so out of control, because they have not had the support that they needed. And so when you start to work with them and understand what's going on, you get to understand that human being behind. So I always tell people, let's look at the roots. As Mr. Babb said, let's not look at the behavior, because there's a human being worth dignity behind that. And getting to that and supporting that has been like a complete privilege these last few months working with the youth here.
Okay. We have another question from the audience. What government programs are available to assist young persons to prevent them from heading toward a life of crime? And this is from Chad Hazel.
Right. The National Peace Program, government has invested over $12 million now at targeting high crime communities and at-risk youth. So I also am aware that probation department has programs. We had a program at the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit called the Dispute Resolution Conflict Mediation Program, where we pull all the children that were having serious problems with violence within the schools, and we work with social workers, mental health professionals, etc., to work with the young people. That program is no longer with the department. I'm also aware that the National Council on Substance Abuse, they have programs there as well, targeting persons who have addiction and other problems. So the programs are there, but it's for the parents to access the programs. Now you have also paradox, but you would find that the parents that you want to reach are not accessing the programs. And that's the reality. Unless it is mandated through the court that a parent access a particular program, it is difficult for parents to reach out to parents and for them to accept the help that you are offering them.
Okay, we have another question. How do we balance being tough on crime versus reaching out to those who need help? This is from John. How do we balance being tough on crime?
Well, I always say you cannot incarcerate yourself out of a problem. You have to deal with, and in life you have two things: human justice and social justice. Criminal justice, sorry. Human justice and criminal justice. One deals with a strict set of rules, regulations, and procedures, while one takes into account the individual and puts a human face to what is going on. How do you be tough on crime? By addressing the crime, not by blanket, but by the individual circumstances that led a person to commit a crime, and address the underlying cause of why they committed a crime. So now, once you are able to balance that, and then you go over to the situation where those who need help, by having the people, the services, the things that are there to provide that assistance that the person needs, that will lead to actual, not just in words, rehabilitation. I often ask people, what's the biggest room in the world? They think it's something physical. No, the biggest room in the world is room for improvement. And I say that because you spoke, Ms. Willoughby, about the programs that are in government. Can there be other programs that come on board to help, aid, and assist? Yes, absolutely. That's why we, our Army, are here. That's why the Alliance of Reform-Minded Entrepreneurs are here, to provide viable solutions to the public at large. Deal with prevention. Unfortunately, we have to deal with intervention. Those who need help, once they come to get the help, they will have the help accessible to be able to deal with their issues.
And to answer that question, there are different strategies to law enforcement. You have strong law enforcement, which is a strategy in itself, but then you have crime prevention, where you have primary, secondary, and tertiary crime prevention measures. All can be done within the Barbados Police Service, or it can be done in collaboration with the Barbados Police Service. So you have your strong law enforcement, where you have a no-nonsense approach to crime and violence, but then you have a balance now where you have community police officers going into communities and working with young people, designing programs that they can work along with the community organizations, etc., as well as organizations like Mr. Babb's that can come on board and assist. So when we look at law enforcement, there are certain tiers to law enforcement that people need to understand. It's not just about arresting and charging and putting behind bars, but there's also that aspect where you seek to find what are those root causes within your communities through community policing and work with at-risk communities and at-risk young people within those communities.
Thank you for that.
I say that because there was a police officer working in that area.
Okay, our next question. Is the present crime a reflection of unrecognized trauma over the years? Is understanding trauma a new thing for us, Anita? I think we would have addressed this partially just now. Maybe you could still answer.
Yeah. So is the present, I'm sorry, what was the question? Is the
present crime a reflection of unrecognized trauma over the years, and is understanding trauma a new thing for us?
I think, yes, I think what we're seeing is a reflection of unrecognized and unresolved trauma. And it's not a blanket statement for everyone, but if we look at the correlations and everything, we're definitely seeing that there is trauma, there is adverse childhood experiences that have happened that are reflecting in what we're seeing, absolutely. And to be able to go in and to be able to work with the youth and to be able to understand what they've gone through, be able to do interventions to heal them, so it's not going to reflect in crime and aggression. Because when people think of addiction, a lot of times people think just drugs and alcohol, right? But there are so many behavioral addictions, and anger and aggression is one of them, right? Because again, if I'm aggressive and I'm in your face, right, it makes me feel powerful, and then I don't have to feel that I'm inadequate. So when we think about addiction, when we think of a way that people also deal with trauma and adverse childhood experiences, it does reflect in aggression and violence. And so we absolutely, I think there are strong correlations if you look at all the research, not just in the United States or Canada, but even research that's done in the Caribbean, you see that for youth and for people who have been in juvenile justice systems and incarceration, they score 6 to 7 out of a 10 scale for adverse childhood experiences. And that's extremely high. And basically all the research is showing is that 99% of youth that are incarcerated have had at least one adverse childhood experience. Most of them have had 6 to 7. So there's a huge correlation between it, and it's really important to start to address the root. And again, of course, we have to have a balance, but to be able to, if we really want to work and resolve a lot of this, is really having programs that really intervene in the root causes.
We have such great organizations and people working for such a cause. I mean, I can see the passion in your eyes as you speak about your babies, and I can see passion from Cheryl about the organization and the data and the information, and I know how you feel about what opportunities are there to streamline all of these different activities and programs that we have. And you can give your final thoughts as well as you answer.
My department is always open to work with organizations. At present, we work very closely with the National Peace Program. We provide the data that they need in order for them to be able to go into the communities and do the work that they do. And they're partnering with organizations across Barbados to carry out their work. Even the communities that are experiencing high crime rates right now, they are dependent on our data in order to access these communities and the types of programs that they need in order to be effective. I think that what we didn't touch on tonight was the fact that our data is also showing us a strong correlation between learning challenges and criminal behavior. We did a study in the prison, and over 95% of the inmates charged for violent crimes were reading at the level of age 3. So it tells me that we have to look at our educational system. You may have children in there who are experiencing learning challenges, and we need to be able to pick them out of the mainstream and work with them at an individual level. So I open the organization that I work for to dialogue with any organization that want to work with us, because as we often hear from our Prime Minister, we have to work together. It is a whole country approach, and so I open my organization to work with any organization that may be interested in working with us or even accessing our data.
Your final thoughts, Glenroy?
I think it's very important that the information is streamlined amongst different agencies and people, and because if we're talking about the Compass magazine and everybody has a take on the Compass magazine, we should all at least have some kind of idea about the Compass magazine by utilizing other person's perspective, expertise, and history and experience. So I believe that streamlining this, cutting out a lot of the red tape that is there, which is a major problem in working and dealing with the issue. And if red tape is prohibiting something or someone from achieving or moving forward, then we need to get rid of the people that are putting this red tape there. As far as final thoughts, I would say this. The village is burning. Are we coming with water or are we coming with gas? I'm coming with water. The Alliance of Reform-Minded Entrepreneurs is coming with water. We see an issue that needs to be addressed, and we are not sitting on the sidelines of life, because it will adversely affect each and every person in this country at some point in time. So we have to step up, take responsibility and accountability. If not, we will become sideline reporters for events that will harm and mess us up in the future. That's my point.
Your final thoughts, Dr. Tessa?
Absolutely. Collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. I think that's the only way that we're going to solve this. All the beautiful work my colleagues here are doing, everyone coming together, everyone putting in the, you know, I like to say that the collective is the expert. And so we have to work where the collective is the expert. That is people in the community, my wonderful colleagues here, and give our young people a second chance. Because I think one of the things that I see too is that we don't give them a second chance. And because it's such a small island, you know, what they've done follows them. We've all made mistakes. We've all done things. And to be able to give our young people a second chance is so important.
Thank you very much. So as you have heard tonight, as we've heard tonight, tackling crime requires more than policing. It demands collaboration, compassion, and commitment at every level of our society. The stories shared and the insights offered point to the need for continued action, but also continued dialogue. Resolving the issues surrounding crime will not be easy, but it is possible when we work together to understand its root causes, support those at risk, and strengthen our communities from the inside out. By adopting this whole-of-nation approach, we can take the necessary steps towards saving our communities. On behalf of the Barbados Government Information Service, thank you to our panelists and to you, our amazing audience, for joining us in this edition of InFocus. I'm Sharifa Medford-Gilkes. Take care, and let's keep the conversation going.